We call it a mountain hat deal.
Yeah.
You know, for those of us that are wearing 100Xs and kind of the cowboy thing, it's a total different atmosphere. They do some really good work. A lot of 4X, 5X wool hats kind of thing, and the burning and all the wild stuff, which we kind of talked about a little earlier. Is, you know, I'm a firm believer here at our shop, we'll do whatever. I'm down, and our slogan here is it's not really about a hat. And that's when we first started. I went to Red Steagall gathering in Fort Worth, and it was right about the time I was at a soul searching spot in life, and I went down there for the ranch rodeo and hung out with some friends and did some praying and kind of went through it. And I said, you know, I'm blessed with the talent to shape hats and to communicate with people. And it just so happens, I think God uses steamers and felt to bring people together in a lot of ways. And so I won't knock a lot of those places that do that crazy stuff. I'll do it. And it's cool, just the history of the hat. And I like seeing people wear a hat. I've had people come down from Kemosabe that have bought a wild looking 4X hat that they burnt the snot out of it and did everything on it. And they came down and said, hey, I'm going to a cattle baron's ball. I'm going to the rodeo, and I don't want to wear my ski hat up there.
Right.
So it's kind of that gateway drug for them of, you know, just get a hat on them. And if they decide they like hats and it's something that they want to pursue, then they go to a Best Hat store when they get home, or they come into Hamblen Hats, or, you know, we've talked about going to J.W. Brooks and going to a lot of these guys. And I come from a little different spot in the hat deal where I think there's enough heads for all of us, and knocking one guy's style or one guy's quality, but everybody's got a spot. They'd laugh at me in Aspen the way I do things. So it works good for everybody.
Hey guys, welcome back to Cowboy Cartel, the podcast. Today we are in Ault, Colorado. It is about, I don't know, it's halfway between Denver and Cheyenne.
Yep.
We're at Hamblen Hats, and I met Travis. So this is Travis Hamblen.
Yes, sir. Hi.
Hi, this is Travis Hamblen.
Travis Hamblen.
And so I met your kids while we were at the Dust of a Vaquero Days concert up in, well, actually it was a music festival up in Gillette, Wyoming.
Yes, sir. I got my oldest as a musician was up there, and the youngest wants to be a cowboy and rope. So it was a perfect place for them to go to while Dad was working.
Yeah. So they were running a rope and dummy.
Yes, sir.
And I guess they had some jackpots and stuff going on over there. And we were really busy while we were there. I mean, I don't think we saw one song start to finish. We were videoing or running around doing something the entire time we were there. And we just happened to take a break right across from, there's a little table there, and we sat right across from your boys and the rope and dummy. And one of your boys came up to me, and he asked if we were, what did he say? He said, are you guys the Cowboy Mafia?
Yes.
Cowboy Mafia.
Yes.
And I said, well, the Cowboy Cartel. And so I knew J.B. Zelke had told me that you know, who they were and who you were. And I'd heard of the shop before, but I wasn't really familiar. So I started talking to them, and I said, hey, you know what? That's really cool. I got this GoPro, and you guys are going to get to see this. A little bit of it. You might have to wait for the full video from Dust of a Vaquero Days, but I'll roll some footage of the roping dummy in here. But we put a GoPro on the roping dummy.
Wow.
And we did a bunch of different shots, and they taught us both how to rope. So I'd never roped before.
I'm so bad.
Everybody starts.
I did get the chair roped.
Oh, yeah.
You guys will get to see that here if Lorena caught it on video.
They didn't try and hustle you for some money in the roping, though, did they?
No. They were very nice, very good teachers, and very helpful getting the video that we needed. And so we really appreciate that. And I said, hey, you know what? We're coming back, you know, this week. We don't have a real schedule. We got kind of all the time we need. We don't really have to be back until Saturday. But, you know, you think your dad be interested in talking hats or letting us see the store, or doing something?
Yeah.
And so he kind of hooked us up, and I spoke with you on the way down here from Gillette. And what sold me on talking to you was your passion for hats and the history for hats, really.
Yes, sir.
Because it's not what you normally hear in Fort Worth. You know, people, oh yeah, anybody can wear a hat. You know, there's a lot of different, perspectives, but you've got a unique perspective.
Yes, sir. I'm a firm believer Texans are going to hate this. However, if you look up the history of the cowboy hat, John B. Stetson had gone to Kansas originally because he had TB, and he was fighting through TB. And while he was there, a group came up to him and said, hey, we're going to Colorado Springs. And I'm sure there's different interpretations, but the one I've always been told and go through, John B. Stetson was at the base of Pikes Peak and felted the first cowboy hat, which was the Boss of the Plains, and sold it to a cowboy coming through Colorado. So I always tell people, I said, the Danbury, Connecticut and the back east kind of twist, they were doing all the European kind of hats. I'm a firm believer the cowboy hat, the first one that we credit, the Boss of the Plains, was built in Colorado. So that's a good piece of history there of why that passion comes through is, a lot of it, those guys were passing through here. And the Mexico, the vaquero culture coming up here, we spoke a little earlier about Mexico. Some of the coolest cowboys I know that I get to go down there every now and again, rope with in Chihuahua. Chihuahua rodeo is just as popular as soccer. So the cultural thing of it is what really intrigues me, and it's not really about hats, it's about people. It brings all of us together.
Let's talk a little bit about your history. So how did you start in the hat business?
So when I was 13, my grandfather had bought hats, and my mom and dad always kept me in hats. And going back even a little earlier, my mom tells the story, and I just heard this when I opened the shop. I had a favorite black hat. I had a speech impediment, and I've got a picture. I'll give it to you to throw up on there.
All right.
My dad's holding me in this black hat, and it is wore out. I mean, it is dropped down, and it is terrible. And where kids had a blankie, I had a hat. Mm-hmm. So I'd left it at my grandma's house one time, and they had to go find that favorite black hat they had bought me at a Western store in Cheyenne. So that love kind of going through there. My dad broke horses. We've got my grandpa's hats in here. We've kind of showed those and going through it. So the respect for the hat is what was taught to me is, take care of it. It's not just a hat. Like, that's an expensive thing. It's something to treasure. And fast forward to about 11, 12 years ago, I had shaped my own hats on a tea kettle. I'd worked for a stock contractor, so working around bulls, you were always tweaking on them. And in the winters, my buddies would not be riding bulls, and we had a little Jiffy steamer at my parents' gun shop. We'd shape hats. And I went through a divorce, and I was in Canada looking for some work, and I worked for Irvine's Western store up there. If you haven't checked them out, little plug, super cool place. Biggest store in the world. Insane.
Is that right?
And I was up there, and I got to shaping hats, and it progressed after I'd left there to working for a custom maker. And it's been 5 years now since we've had this, and God opened the doors to start here. We started, and we still build some custom hats, as well as I had seen what gives us a little niche that you don't see a lot of places is I'm a firm believer that everybody should have a hat that fits them. And just while we were working in here, a guy came in with a straw hat, and his face was over here. And you could shape it. You could shape the hat to fit his face, or you could learn to work the hat and get it where it's shaped. So we do Saratelli's, Atwood's, J.W. Brooks. We build some of our own. We've got some Baileys. We're working on some other stuff coming up. Hopefully here in the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to say the other lines we're carrying. But I don't want my customers to feel like when they come in, it's you're buying this hat, blah, blah, blah. I sell quality. So if I don't feel that somebody's hat line that I bring in or their X system is off par or anything like that, I don't sell their product because I can't stand behind it. But I want to give them that custom fit where I've got the Conformateur, I've got everything to fit them. I've got the equipment in back to give somebody a $300 Saratelli that fits their head and is shaped to it. And eventually they'll want a $1,600 custom, or they'll want to buy a 1000X from here or go wherever. So I really wanted to have a hat shop that did hats for everybody and didn't have the clique of, who's hat's whose. If you want to wear this company's hat, guess what? I'll order it. If you want to wear this company's hat, I got it. So it's about the hats and the people is kind of our history.
That's really cool. I love the I love the history in the West, and just seeing all of the people wearing cowboy hats in Wyoming. It was fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
You know, how's that culture here in Colorado? Do you see that as much?
Yeah, we're out here on the Eastern Plains, kind of northeastern. So we're kind of a hub. We've got a lot of not so agricultural friendly, not so cowboy people. But here in Weld County, we're one of the top, don't quote me, but I think one of the top 5 producers of cattle. We've got 100,000 head feedlot right on the outside of Greeley, the packing house for JBS, a lot of little grow yards. We're kind of a grow community. The Plains raise them, contract them, send them in to grow it. So we're in a cool little spot here. The town's got 2 stoplights, I think. So we get a lot of people coming from Fort Collins, from the ag school, from CSU that'll come. A lot of guys dropping down from Cheyenne, just because we are kind of that. We get people from eastern Nebraska that don't have anywhere to buy, or western Nebraska, western Kansas, coming in because we've kind of become that hub for quality products and quality service.
Yeah, I noticed when we came in, it's a town of 4,900
Yes, sir.
people, something like that.
Yeah.
Not a big town.
No, tiny.
And you've got quite a good sized store here.
Yes, sir.
With a lot of equipment back there for making and cleaning hats. So
Yes, sir.
you told me on the phone, you don't make a lot of custom hats
Correct.
at the moment because you're so busy selling.
Yes, sir.
everybody else's brand.
We've got a weekend crew, a couple people that help out the boys. As much as they want to say they don't know anything about hats, they can sit in here and help, and they're smarter than they play. My mom, my sister, my dad, kind of a family operation. Ben works for me on weekends, and we've got some other people that fill in. But I struggle so much with putting myself in the back of the house building hats, because the front of the house needs the hat shaped, and the conversations and the history and kind of that. So I'm kind of torn both ways. I clean a lot of hats during the week. I still build. We build hats for some musician friends and those kind of things when we need to have some bodies built. We do a lot. I'm partial, but I think J.W. Brooks and the Atwood guys are building some of the nicer hundreds out there right now. And when it comes to fitting them, I can give them that custom fit. In, a lot of the custom guys that are good friends of mine, so we talk about it, is there's a lot of stuff put on a custom maker. And the finish of a hat is super important. There's a lot of big guys and even a lot of smaller guys that can't get that fit in the finish on them. I always look, the number one thing I look at a custom hat when somebody brings it in and it's not fitting, or it's this or it's that, is the finish of the sweatband, the roll where it comes under. It's not flexed up here. And there's production hats that can't get that roll that's supposed to be on a hat, that push the sweatbands inside of the hat. We've talked about the gluing on of hat bands, $1,600 hats with super glue on them, or little things like that, and not knocking anybody, but that finish and that customer service and fit aspect is what makes the biggest difference to me. And I think a lot of guys are using a lot of the same bodies and are going really fast. They're not letting them sit and cool properly under a bag, so they're not getting that stiffness to them, and they're not letting them finish. And so that's our thing, is just having a quality hat. There are some factories out there that are making better hats than some custom makers, and vice versa. There's some custom guys that aren't making very many hats a year that'll put some of those mid-sized guys to shame that are only doing X amount of hats and doing it well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember in my head as you say something, oh yeah, we want to talk about that.
You can interrupt me. I'm good about rambling. So just say, hold on a second, dude.
No, that's okay. I want to let you get your thought out. So talking about custom makers, to me, I've looked at a lot of custom hats.
Yes, sir.
And the best custom makers are using the same bodies as, well, most of them. Mm-hmm. Most of the best custom are using the same bodies that the major companies are using.
Yes, sir.
So everybody's using, even Stetson Resistol are now using FEPSA bodies.
Yes, sir.
FEPSA has and I don't want to get too in the weeds on that, but you know, they've taken the felting process and they've kind of I don't want to say revolutionized it, but they've brought it into the 21st century.
Yes, sir.
And they're using, you know, equipment that's updated equipment.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, they're pretty consistent on their bodies.
Yes, sir.
And so that's one thing. But what I've noticed is a hat made in a drier climate does a lot better.
Yes, sir.
So that was kind of my question, is how is it making hats here? I would think you guys could make some of the best hats in the world because you're at about 6,000 foot elevation.
Yeah.
Here. And it might not be dry, you know, it might be 60% humidity, but that doesn't translate to what it does in Texas.
Yeah. And the aging, for me, what I've noticed a lot with the hats is, in my opinion, and this is 100% that, is the blocking, the flanging, and the letting them dry, which is very important. And going through that, I use a lot of the Winchester bodies and know some guys that do. And I think that gets you sometimes into the Ford, Chevy, Dodge thing and kind of goes through it. And I agree 110% with what you said about everybody kind of going through that. I've noticed with a lot of my hats is when they age. So I can send one out and I can set it under the bag and back and let it sit for a full day and cool and really take that extra time on it. And I send it out and I shape it and I'm like, man, this hat feels kind of soft. Mm-hmm. Well, the guy wears it outside, lets the sun hit it, and it ages. And I pick it up and I'm going, ooh, I wish it would have felt like that when it left. And I'm a firm believer that those fibers pull back together.
Absolutely.
And I do think up in here it's a lot easier. And in the winter, it is brutal up here because you'll shape a hat for a guy that's headed to San Antonio, or at the worst is headed to Houston during the rodeo. Well, Houston gets so damp down in there. You shape it up here and everything's perfect. He gets it down there and he's like, that son of a gun. This hat looked perfect and now I'm in well, bro, you were at 90% humidity versus dry. So when that humidity pulls those fibers apart, I think that's a lot of it, and the maintenance of it. You know, finding a good hat shop or a maker you can take it into and say, hey, can you plate this back out? And I see a lot of guys online ironing them.
Yeah,
which is 100%. I've done it. I've gone there, but the thing is with that,
that's what we teach. You know, the best way to, if you have hard creases in a felt.
Yep.
The best way to get it back out, or if you have a felt that's floppy, the best way to tighten it up is to iron it.
Yep.
But you got to know what you're doing.
Yep. And have a good iron.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of these guys that'll take them, and I've told my boys when they're out on the road somewhere and a hat's bad is get that beach towel, put it on wool, and don't put any water in that iron, and just hit it with that and let it cool on the countertop or wherever. And I see so many people that'll pull that out, put the beach towel on there, and pull out their iron they use to crease their jeans and pour that water to it. Well, that steam's hitting it, and it's such a wet steam that they go through there and they set it on the marble countertop and do it, and the water builds up under it, and they get through, and they're going, why is it not? It didn't work like you told me. And going through that, and there's some really good irons on Amazon, some of the commercial steam irons that can go through there. And, you know, those processes and understanding, I've heard you guys talk about it on there, is the quality of steam.
Yes.
You see these guys on TikTok, and we've all shaped hats. Guilty. I learned to shape on a tea kettle. I did it. But understanding that what takes me 5 minutes in here to shape might take you an evening, because just because you got steam rolling out of there or you poured some sugar in it, you're getting it wet.
Yeah.
You know, and learning, you watch those old guys that kind of taught us how to shape on the tea kettle. Man, it was get this section of it done and move to this section and let it dry and go through it. And so many people see it and think of us as shapers, or go to your shaping school and then get home and are, we need to hurry. It's an art, man. Patience on a hat and letting them dry is.
You know, when we do a hat shaping school, you know, we'll tell them, look, you are not going to come out of here in 2 days or 3 days and be an expert.
Yep.
We are showing you the technique. Now you have to go back and practice it. Right. And if you're using a Jiffy, it's going to take you long.
Yep.
Right. And Jiffy's a great steamer at a good price for somebody who wants to start.
100%.
Now, I mean, we love the pressure steamers, and you know, you can't get me to use a Jiffy, you know, especially on one of my hats.
Yep.
Right.
I love them till they break. I spent a lot of time. I had one the other day I spent a lot on it, and it had the water line coming into it, state of the art. And man, about a year and a half.
Yeah.
And I had to do a rebuild, and I was on the phone. They'd send me parts start of the week, and I'd finish them end of the week. And that's what I always tell the guys is, you can get one. And when I go to stores and kind of do some consulting, I'm like, blow it down. Understand that letting that water sit in there when you're shaping one a day, you're better off leaving it dry and going through that and understanding those big steamers. Everybody's like, I want one in my kitchen. No, you don't.
Look, I mean, we've got 2 of them at the house, and we use them a lot.
Yeah.
Not as much as a store would. But if you have a store and you're shaping 1 hat a week, you just use a Jiffy.
Yep.
You know?
Oh, yeah. And do that. And I keep a Jiffy under the seat of the pickup. Absolutely. And I keep one at the house, and I keep one in every one of my trailers going somewhere, because I always told somebody, I said, I will guarantee you in a pinch, I can do everything I do on that big steamer on that Jiffy, as long as I don't have a line of 30 people and got to get stuff going. You know, most corporate type events or somewhere you're at, you can shape them. But it's figuring out where that dampness point is at. And even the socks on them and the sponges that go into it, it's just not as hot and pressurized.
It's a difference between wet steam versus dry steam.
Yep.
Super saturated, steam versus...
Put a paper towel over your favorite steamer or at your hat shop, and that'll tell you what the guy's got going. Because if you can put a paper towel over it and it's not wet, and they can hold it for 20 or 30 seconds, that shows you why they're shaping them so fast,
Yeah. So I want to talk about, I want to talk about a couple different things, really. Yes. I want to talk about your ability to recraft hats.
Yes, sir.
And you were telling me you can do anybody's hat, and you said you would do a 5X.
Yes, sir.
If it had sentimental value.
Yeah, I'll do them. I always warn the people on those 5Xs, because we all know, my biggest thing I preach here is teaching people to feel the density of the fibers. Mm-hmm. I feel for so long we've all felt for stiffness. Well, a board is stiff, but I let them feel the fibers, and I explain to them like in a Velcro situation where those lock together and the heat and pressure kind of brings them together. And I'll tell people on some 5Xs and stuff I get in, I've got a antique stiffener that's known as the magic sauce around here that I don't share with people.
Is that right?
And I can put it on there and I can get your hat stiff. I can go through this. But if you bring me a 5X and the felt's damaged, if it's Grandpa's hat, you're going to have to be patient with me, and I will try and get it back. And if it's pre-shaped and the crown's at 5.5, or 5 1/4, wherever it's at, I can't get your cattleman shape back in it, but I can go through it. And I think there's some really good 7Xs from back in the day.
Oh, yeah.
And some 10Xs.
We talk about this all the time, though. A 2X or a 3X from 1983 is about a 7X today.
Yep. Well, Phil, you got to Phil Grandpa's hat that's sitting back behind you.
I didn't manhandle it. I just kind of
that 20 that was there, and it's
can
thin.
Can we bring it?
Yeah, you can bring it for sure. And it's that was my grandfather's hat. You can see the old AQHA crease in it.
Thin.
Oh, and a 20. And it was wavy. He used to shape it on the Jiffy. And I kept looking across here, and I tell people, that was my grandpa's hat from the 70s. And they'd look at it, and it was wavy. And so you can feel that. I just put that on my plater and back.
So, I mean, what I noticed first is how thin the body, thin it is, right?
Yep.
So, I love to see a hat like that. And it's not super stiff, right?
No.
But it's
dense.
Yeah, it is dense.
Those from the 70s, if there's a generation that makes my mouth water, those 50s, 60s, 70s, if you can find a good 100 from there, man, those guys had it going on when they did those.
Fox Guitars Rock says, I don't find Stetson sizes to be consistent lately. My wife bought me a Stetson straw and a Buffalo wool Stetson recently, both in 7 3/8. The straw fits like a custom hat, but the wool is very big.
I wouldn't say that's just a Stetson problem right now. I think there's a lot of those companies that are turning out a lot of hats right now. And the sweatbands will vary a little bit. And again, you're dealing with straw versus felt, which is going to change. A felt's going to give a little more than a straw and kind of break in there. And depending on where you're at, humidity-wise, all of that. So I wouldn't blame it specifically on the company.
No.
But a lot of that.
What I have found, a lot of people if they haven't worn a lot of hats, or if they're new to hats, and they try maybe a Stetson, the oval. Well, a straw is really stiff, right? Yeah. And so maybe they're confusing oval with size.
Yep.
Because if you have an oval that is maybe tight front to back, and you got a lot of room here, it might feel tight.
Yeah.
But it's not.
Yep.
And then you go to the same size in a felt, and maybe it's just a slightly different oval or whatever. And I wear a 7. I'm dead between 7 and 1/8 and 7 1/4. Mm-hmm. And if I push on my hat, you could see there's room.
Yep.
But that's just because I have room here, and you got to understand oval
and crown height will vary too. If you get a straw hat with a little bit taller crown on it, and you get a felt hat that's blocked a little shorter, and I just dealt with a guy in here earlier, is the height of the shape of your hat basically varies from a little above your ear to the high point here. And if your straw is a taller block and your crown is your felt is a little shorter crown, it's going to hit on the top here and not feel like it's going down all the way too. So there's a lot of variants that go into that. From the oval, even the sweatbands will change. If you've got a cloth sweat versus a leather sweat, fit's going to vary too.
Lorena, she's got a couple of hats. So she wears a 7 5/8 drummed generally.
Right.
And so she can wear a 7 1/2 with a Drylex.
Yeah.
And it's much, it's almost the same fit.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a lot of variants that go into that. I wouldn't blame it all on a company.
No. I mean, I agree. There's, I think knowing your size of your head, how that translates to the hat size, and the oval, the shape of your head.
And the sensitivity level of a scalp and a skull. You might be able to wear a size 7 1/4 and have an exact same 22.5-inch head as the next guy. But that other guy, where he might have a pressure point here, or he might have, all of that. Yeah. There's lots to unpack on that one that I won't bore you with, but yeah.
That's getting in the weeds.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So is this in Colorado? Mike asks, if so, are there noticeable differences between Colorado and Texas regarding which hat creases are most popular?
That's a good question. Let's talk about hat shapes. Mm-hmm. In this area.
Yes,
do you find it similar to Texas shapes, or?
Social media has changed that all up.
Yeah.
I do everything from AQHA creases here, Buckaroo creases, everything's kind of in there. And I think social media has made that and the internet as a whole, that it's not as noticeable as you go there. I think in Texas you do get a lot of kind of where I'm the mule kick, and you get a lot of that. But up here it's really a melting pot of it. We got some of the buckaroos that'll come in from northern Wyoming, Nevada, that bring their style in here to the feed yards back in the day, and still you get some. And you got them guys coming up from Texas. You got the colleges. So it's really a melting pot. We get to do all kinds of shapes here. So it's kind of a cool region for that, because you're not just shaping a Texas style or a California style. You do everything here. So
something that we've done recently, we've been doing wide ribbons on hats, felt and straw. And when we were up north in Gillette, we were talking about the ribbons because we saw a lot of guys wearing the wide ribbons, and they're saying that's a up north thing.
Mm-hmm.
Canada, Wyoming, Montana, that they've been wearing those wide ribbons for a while. Do you see that at all?
Yeah, I think so. And I think when it gets into the regional thing, it gets you off on a little bit of tangent, because everybody's got so much pride in their hat. And as we've become more of a mobile society, and again, social media based, I think so many people get to almost gatekeeping their hat style and saying, "Oh, you can't snap that. You're not here, or you're not there." And I really do think certain types of people take so much pride in their. We do a lot of JBs and a lot of Minics and a lot of that up in here. And it used to be kid's a bull rider, or it goes through there. And I think a lot of people take their pride in that, and I think it's awesome. But I think, just like we'd opened with, is, man, find something you like, wear your style, and don't let where you're at determine that. You know, if you're bad enough to wear a buckaroo hat in the stockyards with your pants cuffed and suspenders, and that's you, I don't know that you're going to walk into any of those places down there and somebody say, dude, go change your hat, you know?
That brings up a good point, though. And I forget what it was.
That's all right.
I wanted to talk about shapes or something there. I had something I was going to ask you there.
The regions and
it was something.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. We'll get on to something else. Yeah, fine. You got any other questions, real quick?
Yes. Has the hat style of hat feathers changed since the 1970s?
Hat feathers?
Yes.
I think so. I think you see in the 70s, you've seen some of those guys wearing big feathers like some of us do here. But a lot of the feathers I seen in the 70s hats were put on here.
Oh, yeah.
And the feather hat band kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
I don't, if that's what you're asking, but I don't think the feather, there's different sentimental meanings of a feather on a hat, but I think that has stayed pretty much the same. You know, tuck it in your hat band and wear it. And,
well, look, Lane Frost, he was kind of famous for the feather.
Oh, yeah. And Monty Hawkeye Hansen.
Yeah.
Wore the big old eagle feathers through the 70s and a lot of those kind of guys. And you still see that. I think if that's what you're talking about, it's still the
J.B.
same.
Mooney.
Yep.
Right? So, I mean, there's another one.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess it's personal preference. Lorena loves feathers. I mean, I think she's got feathers in every hat.
Oh, yeah. Mine have.
By law.
By law.
I've got this one. And when I was in Chihuahua with my buddy down there, I got a pigeon feather off of Pancho Villa's tomb.
Oh, yeah?
And I picked up and put in there. And then I found another one when I was roping with the boys one time. And I got my Bad Bronx Studios toothpick in there. So everything, I'm all about the stuff in your hat that makes the memories.
Yes. Yeah, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And so do you keep anything inside your hat?
Oh, tickets.
Tickets.
I'm big on tickets in my hats. And most of the time they fade out. But I keep all my concert tickets in my hat to go back. And some of them get washed out, but yeah, I don't know why I keep them. I can't tell where most of those are from. That's Dickey's Arena, so that had to be the rodeo. But yeah, I keep tickets in the hat. There's one from the Grand Ole Opry when we were there. So yeah, now they got them heat deal. I probably shouldn't keep them in there, but yeah, I keep tickets in my hats.
Yeah.
What's the weirdest thing you've ever found in a hat?
We've heard that question before, yeah. What's the weirdest thing you've ever found?
I've had uncomfortable moments. The first time it ever happened to me, it was a busy Saturday, and a guy hid a feminine pad in there as instead of a paper towel. And there was a shop full of people, and he pulled his hat off, and it fell on the floor, and everybody jumped back, didn't quite know what. But that and antique hats, I like to pull the sweatbands out or flip them out, and old newspapers. But my favorite thing to find in a hat is the old Hatters Union stamp. They had a sticker that went in them from the Hatters Milliners Union.
Is that right?
And I like finding those underneath there. And if the people let me have them, I keep them back because they're just kind of cool. That's just part of that history that you don't see a whole lot in them.
Well, speaking of old historic hats, you've got one right behind you. Can we talk about that?
Yes, sir. I've got, pull it out.
Oh, you guys are going to love this.
Yeah. So, we'll roll some video in of the box. It came with the original box. And did you get pictures of all of the?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we got pictures of everything. We'll roll that in here. But this is something really interesting, and it's not a Western hat, but it has a Western legacy.
So my dad is big on collecting antique guns from Browning, and he was at a collector's show and sent me a picture of this silk top hat that was gifted to Buffalo Bill from the city of London in 1904. And it has the box back there, and she'll show you some pictures on the inside where it's got Buffalo Bill. It's got 1904, I think it was February where it was written in there, and WFC and some measurements on it. And you knew right away that it was a silk top hat. You see a lot of top hats, and very seldom do you see a true silk top hat. I've been working back and forth with Locke & Co. in London to find more information about it because they're deep history over there. But yeah, it's a silk top hat. It came from a museum that a doctor had it in his private collection, and it was gifted to Buffalo Bill in 1904 from the city of London, and the King Edward there on it. So it's super cool.
So the most cool thing about this is, I mean, it feels like glass.
Oh yeah.
And it's kind of a felted silk.
Yep.
And they forgot how to do this.
Oh yeah.
They haven't done this in over 100 years.
And it's in pretty good shape. There's some wear marks where it shipped, but most of these I've seen were falling apart.
Yeah.
So to be in that kind of shape, the sweatband's kind of coming out of it, but it's and had the brush with it.
Yes.
And everything on it.
There's a really cool brush, and we figured out it was also a lint brush.
Lint brush, yep. So it's gangster. This is one of my favorite pieces. I've been communicating back and forth with them in London about possibly taking a trip to London to deliver it to them. Did
they want to see it?
Yeah, they've seen the pictures. They said they knew pretty much right away the company that had made it, and they said Lock & Co. they thought had bought them out in 1970. So they had most of that stuff through there. But they have, if you're ever in London as a hat person, go to Lock & Co. is what it's called, and they've been making hats. They have some very historic ones in there, and super super cool old hat shop.
Well, for a limited time, I guess, unless you take it to Lock & Co., it's on display here in Ault, Colorado at Hamblen Hats.
Yes, sir.
So if you're in the area, stop in and check it out and say hi to Travis.
We got some pretty cool old stuff. They've been asking about this. We'll go on it, but lots of, I mean, I try and, when I first started, I had the slogan, honoring the art of the hat. And I learned from a great custom maker that knew a lot about hats and taught me a lot. And that history and the study in the history, and hats are cool to me, and hat nerds. I like talking to hat nerds.
Me too. So we've had questions about this.
Yes.
And so I noticed this as soon as we walked in the door, and I thought, man, that's cool.
That's one of my favorite things I own. I always talk about the Flying H and the heritage and the people we got it from. When I first started getting into hats, there was a lady, she was living in Fort Worth. Claire Parr was her name. She had done a lot of hats for musicians in Nashville and then moved to Fort Worth. And deep roots, she talked about hanging out with Kurt Cobain in the studio. Wow. And her dad was a big producer in the 70s and rock and 80s, 90s kind of thing. And I called her and I bought some equipment. She was kind of getting out of it. And during COVID, I got some money put together to kind of bail us through what was going on. And she sold me her business. And this was one of her prized pieces, was the spool cabinet. And I've got this old one as well as another one over there. So it's a spool cabinet where you used to be able to go in, the drawers slide out. Most of these are old wooden spools, but it was in a fabric store, and you could buy all of the spools of yarn you needed were put in there. So I would guess possibly late 1800s, early 1900s kind of piece. And to be in the shape it is, I don't see any facts that it was restored, but just kind of a cool old hat, that one. And I'd mentioned my chaps my mom made me when I was a kid. The first custom hat I ever built for my grandpa Sam, his favorite boots, his everyday hat. And then one of my first customers, Roger Mance, he's a big supporter, always checked in on me while I was on the road during COVID. He passed during COVID in his hat. And then a Kazakhstan cowboy hat I traded straw hat off my head to a guy from the Olympic Committee for. So lots of cool, this building was built in 1950 as a car lot. And we wanted to keep, you guys in Texas are lucky because like Bigger's old hat store on the town square, and Brooks Atwood has this one on the town square, and you go down to Capitol Hatters, and they used to be there on the town square in these little towns and these old shops. And I wanted something like that, and I found this one. So it's pretty cool.
It is cool. You have a whole side, two sides of windows here, and it's
It was where you bought Chevys in the 50s, and I have the old ramp out there. Right? And it was an old car showroom from the 50s, and we rebuilt it, or did some fresh paint and kind of did everything on here. So I couldn't ask for a cooler shop in this region.
Yeah, it works. It works,
yes, sir,
for sure. So we were talking about other brands you carry. So you're obviously not making your own straw.
No, sir.
But what are you carrying in straw?
I do the pro hats.
Mm-hmm.
I've been doing some Baileys, and a lot of the twisters right now at a pricing point for a lot of my rodeo guys and kind of working cowboys. And we're working on possibly by the end of the month having some stuff settled up where we'll start doing some resistals.
You got Atwood, you got J.W. Brooks.
Yes, sir.
And have you looked at bigger at all?
I have looked at some of the biggers and kind of talked with Jeff back and forth on getting some of his straws up. Jeff's an awesome dude, and I really, really like his hats. And my hardest part is right now is square footage. I can only fit so much we've got a 32-foot trailer out there that we take to shows that's loaded with ropes and tack just to try and expand. So we're doing some designs on that, and I would do some biggers hats. I think Jeff's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I think he makes a fantastic felt, and he's one of the only people making straws in the United States.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean,
and you talk about the heritage.
Oh,
man, that dude was there. And most of these guys coming through that are going, I want to do the hat styles, and he explains where those shapes came from.
Right.
I
mean, the guy has a wealth of knowledge. And his name is on some hat shapes. You know? So I mean,
and he was the right hand man to, I know how things get, but one of the guys that I would say is a legend in growing the hat business. And he started out with Maddox there in the stockyards and went through that and kind of helped grow to that spot. And I think he was with him at the point where he bought American Biggers was there. And, Jeff, and super cool dude. I'll Snapchat back and forth. And from being a hat guy, when I first cut my teeth in the hat business, there was a lot of don't talk to him, don't be friends with him, don't put that on there, and kind of some of that stuff. And when I struck out on my own and went and talked to some guys, one of the first places I stopped was down there to talk to Jeff, and he helped me with whatever, showed me through his store, anything you need, and we'll get back and forth on Snapchat and ask about buying some stuff. And he's doing some stuff with 3D printing on parts for our conformateurs and some familions and bodies, and him and J-Dub and Kevin at Brinks Hattery and Brooks Atwood and Junior at Atwood Hat Company, and we were talking Brooks is doing his Spradley hats.
Yeah.
And it's really cool how any of us that are having problems, if we're struggling with a body that's doing this and we can't get it to do that, and you can't block it here, you can't do that, it's really cool that there's a group of us that can all talk. And I know if I needed something tomorrow and was struggling with a body, I could message Jeff and he would help me. So it's really cool in that aspect of, and I want to spread that up here through people, is lots of people are making good hats, and there's lots of good people in the hat business, and none of us play the whole take that sticker off, I'm not shaping your hat, as much as it seems that the customer base takes such pride in where they buy their hats. Majority of us that own shops and are building hats, we all get along with each other and trade bodies back and forth if we need it. It's a cool industry.
Well, I agree with you 100%. Jeff has been great for us. I mean, like I said, he's just a wealth of knowledge, and he was there on a lot of this stuff, and so we really appreciate him. I have found that there is some of that.
100%.
Don't talk to this guy or don't talk to that guy.
I don't want him following me, block him there.
Yeah, a lot of that happens, and it just shouldn't. There's room for everybody. In this industry. We were seeing the biggest Western boom since probably the 1980s. So, actually probably even bigger than the 1980s.
They say I had talked to a guy that has pretty deep sales records, and historically hats go in 3-year spurts. Throughout history, and right now we're on year 5. So it's one of those situations where it is just kept going, and it feels like it's tapering off a little bit. But like I told somebody, I said, the thing is when we talk about a drop or things slowing down in a hat business, it's never going to die. You're going to wear one out. Somebody's going to wear one out. But eventually, a lot of the people that are buying them off the Yellowstone craze or the fashion craze, OOTDs, wherever you go on it, eventually those people get a closet full of hats. And when you've got your 2 gray hats, your black hat, your chocolate hat, your silver belly, your 5 pinks, your wherever going through it, and you're not wearing them out, pretty soon you don't go buy something else because you've got your 5 black hats. Now, the guys like you, me, a lot of my customer base that are wearing them every day, they're wearing it out and their daughter graduates and they need a new black hat for it and kind of going through it. So it never dies, but it kind of tapers where the people that aren't wearing them out got a closet full until their kids graduate and they have the money to buy one, and then it revitalizes and rolls. So it's kind of a cool trend to follow because it's never out of style.
Well, speaking of 3 black hats and 3 gray hats or whatever, what do you think are maybe the colors that everybody should have in their arsenal?
Black.
110%. I hate black.
I've got a dozen black hats. I bought this year a white hat as a dress hat, and I didn't buy a really nice one. I bought a 10X, but I bought a white hat for this fact. You'll see Monday a lot of times in a white hat.
Yep.
And, you start going down that list. I started realizing a lot of events I would go to, if I showed up as a hat maker at an event wearing a black hat just like everybody else, pretty soon if you were standing up above watching, everybody's got a black one. And every time I buy a black hat, it ends up, I dusted this one off in between coming on camera because it looked that bad. But I wear a black hat every day and it sweats up, it gets dirty. That white hat sits on the top shelf. I keep the powder rag beside it and I wear it for dress. But I think, in my opinion, everybody needs a black hat because there's going to be a wedding, a funeral, whatever. I do think grays can be in that same category, but everybody needs a good dark hat and a good light hat. In my opinion, I really like the naturals for a light colored hat. The reason being is it's not silver belly and it's not white. It's not going to show dirt and dust as bad if you wear it to a rodeo, you go there. And it doesn't have as much bleaches and no dyes in it.
Right.
So they tend to be a little tougher. But I'm a fan. You can see Grandpa's hats for silver belly. And I think a classic silver belly is there. But I don't think everybody needs one. I think if you like them, but I do think black is always black or any dark. I don't want to be preaching that you got to have black, but I think having that good dark dress hat that kind of goes with everything. And I think your blacks and grays are there. I struggle with browns from a fashion aspect. Really? Because you get people that have to wear black boots, black belt, black hat and kind of match into there. And I think if you're wearing a black shirt, it doesn't always go with brown, and it's kind of a person's taste. But I do think blacks and grays, everybody needs one good one there where they go anywhere they want to go. It's always in style.
Yeah. I love my silver belly. It's starting to take a beating. It's got some spots on it and stuff, but so they don't hold up to the dirt and elements like something else would. But
buckskin's my favorite. Like I've tried some silver bellies, and that's what I always kind of tell people from a historical standpoint. Silver belly has varied as a light color. Yeah. Even Saratelli's silver belly that they'll send is a buckskin to me.
Really?
And you look at historically in Stetsons and Resistals, their silver bellies have gone from everything of almost a white to almost a blue kind of tint to it and going through that. So I always tell people when they call and they're like, I want a silver belly.
Yeah.
Can you specifically, because to me, that's a bone, a buckskin kind of thing. I don't call that silver belly if it's got kind of that yellow, pinkish, kind of that tan tint to it.
Yeah. So like an American silver belly has that pinkish hue to it. Yep. That's how I always describe it. So what do you consider the silver belly? Like the silver sand?
Kind of the blue. Yeah. Kind of that silver sand, almost the blue, gray, light color to it.
If you guys don't see colors like we do. So the silver sand is a cooler color.
Yes, sir.
And it looks cooler. It looks cold, and you feel the blue hue on it, right? And the silver belly is kind of that pink. Think of the khakis from World War II.
Oh yeah,
the pinks.
You ever want to know the difference in them? Set a bride to be down with her groom and let them explain to you what the colors are, because I always tell grooms when they come in, your bride was dreaming of this hat long before your parents were probably dreaming of you. Like her mom was dreaming of it for her, kind of thing. So that's where the colors, and there's guys that aren't as picky and just want a light color, but I'm with you. Like when I look at, I'm like, that one's not silver belly. That one's silver sand, and going through it. But yeah, I think those lighter colored hats are really pretty for dress and go in there. But I've always been taught through the years that when they bleach them, to get them that light color. Yeah. When I build a white hat, I built a white one for Stock Show this year for their Citizen of the West Award. It came to me yellow.
Yeah.
And you finish it and you're going, this isn't. And then at the end, when you powder it, it all comes together. But that bleach, to me, is what takes it out. So if I can talk somebody into it, I think that natural is always a good dress hat if they're going to be wearing it hard. If they're going to take care of it, go light.
I think silver belly to me is a spring and early fall color, when it's still warm out. And that, I don't know, that's just how I tend to wear it. Right? When it's warm enough, that I can get away with, wearing felt still.
The lady at the Sixes used to not let any of her guys wear dark hats.
Really?
So they all had to wear light colored silver bellies or lighter because bad guys wore black. So you see a lot of the guys at the Sixes, and I don't know what the era was or how long she'd owned it, but that's where they'd wear. And I get a lot of cowboy guys that will wear a lighter colored hat in the summer because they say it's lighter color, so it's not as hot. And I tend to wear felt longer than most people. I will wear it to an event, or if I'm going to be inside all summer long. I don't care if it's 105 out. But I mean, if we're going to be outside, I tend to wear straw. I'm a terrible human being. I don't wear straw hats. I wear, and it's cooler up here. It's a little different.
I'm with you.
But in the summer, I've been at 105 announcing in a crow's nest in eastern Colorado. And I had an old cowboy from North Vernal, Utah. Mm-hmm. And he had sent his guys out. And this really makes sense when they go through it is you look a lot of them guys down on the border towns, black hats, white cotton shirts, button to here, and 501s. They wear what that is. And an old timer explained it to me. He said, what makes you hot is the sun.
Yeah.
So if you put a straw hat on that is lightweight with lots of breathing so the air gets to it, the sun gets to it. And if you're follically challenged like I am on the top of your head, and even on the people's faces, you'll see if they wear probably one of the most popular hats right now is that jute style.
Yeah. And
you can see guys that have wore jutes all day will have almost like a lace pattern if they're really out in the sun and not getting any shade. So I'm a big proponent of felts year round. I don't fight people about it, and I don't get in those arguments with it. Don't tell me when to wear my hat, and I won't tell you when to wear yours. Now, when it's snowing up here, nothing drives me nuts worse than to see a guy wearing a straw hat in the
winter.
Yep.
But
I won't mock him or say anything to him, but I'm with you.
Let's so Lorena's resetting cameras.
Yeah.
Let's take some questions.
I have another question here.
Yeah.
How do people keep their ears warm when it's cold in the winter here while wearing a cowboy hat?
There are some pretty cool companies that make earmuffs that'll fit under your hat. I don't know if you've seen them in Texas.
So we were I was in the Navy, and so we always had to wear either a ball cap or a Dixie Cup hat or whatever. Yeah. And so we had earmuffs that wrapped around the back of your head and cover them. So, this has been, that was 2001.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a thing forever. A way to keep your head.
They make some of those. There's a lady down south that makes one that has really, really thin, like wild rag stuff, and it folds up under your sweatband and comes down and goes under. But I wear big collars and wild rags, and at the end of the day, I'm a fair weather cowboy. So if it's cold, I'm in here steaming hats.
There you go.
Yeah. No more questions so far.
Okay. Sweet. So let's talk about your refurbishing. We touched on it a little bit.
Yes, sir.
But you can do a lot of things. You can do ribbons. You can do bound edges. Can you put a bound edge? If I brought this hat into you and I said, can you put a bound edge? You could do that.
I can flange it out. I've got a flanging machine you seen back there, and I'm sure we'll get some pictures.
Oh, yeah. We got some video. You guys will get to see that now.
Perfect. It has a press that comes down, puts heat and pressure to it. So I'd have to check for sure, but it's like 200 and something degrees and 110 PSI. So that heat and pressure comes down. I've got a set of plates for regular oval, long oval aluminum plates that a buddy of mine put in there. And that pulls the fibers back together. I can flatten it out, sew one on there. I've got a complete set of blocks of long ovals, regular ovals, 51s, 82s, all the blocks, as well as I've got a sandbag from the 30s, which is the predecessor to the plater. And so
I don't understand that. I've never seen that. What is this?
Oh, so the sandbag back there has a heat element in it. and it's full of sand, and you pull it down with pressure, and it sits on top of the hat and will cool the hat and pull the moisture out with the sand.
Interesting.
And that's where we were talking about, really taking that time. And that's old. They're really hard to find.
So you leave the block in?
No, so I'll do... So
how do you not...
One of two ways, depending on when you're doing it. I'll block one, sew a new sweatband in it, and I'll flange it out on a flange board that fits, which gives the curl of the sweat and goes through everything. And then I'll put it under the sandbag, and the sandbag will pull it all together with either a band block in it, or for the custom fitting thing, I'll put a person's head in it from there. And then that final process molds
Not their real head.
Not their real head. Just a copy of their head from the...
So you'll make a band block, or you'll use a vermilion.
Yep.
Put the vermilion
and put it in there and do kind of that final process on it to do that.
So when you do a custom, do you make a custom band block, or you just use the vermilion?
Sometimes I will. If the person's got a really hard-shaped head, and this is something that little group of us have all kind of talked about, is majority of people know, just like you said, I'm between an 1/8 and a 1/4. So when I try that hat on, I know that if I take it home and put it on the tea kettle or put it on the Jiffy and I wear it all day, that hat's going to fit to my head. Yeah. The biggest struggle as a custom maker is that margin for error of an 1/8 of an inch or a 1/16 of an inch is terrible. Yeah. So somebody goes to Houston in the winter, their hat gets soft and now it doesn't fit. And they're wanting to cuss you because their hat doesn't fit. Or vice versa. You get a Texas guy, sends a hat up here to his guy, and now it doesn't fit. Well, it dried out and it kind of shrunk. So if somebody is really particular, their head is super wobbled off or whatever, I'll make them a cedar and kind of go through it. But I've noticed most of my customers that are coming in know, hey, I'm a 7 3/8. Can you long oval this? Can you, just like the guy earlier was really wide here, kind of had that egg-shaped oval. Can you pull the sides out? And a lot of times if you flange that or plate their head into it and let it sit for a day or two, it kind of takes that shape. But if we have issues, I'll make them a head pattern.
And there's some misinformation about hat sizes. And we've seen this on the forums where somebody will say, hey, my hat doesn't fit right. Should I use tape? Should I use foam? And you'll see somebody say, well, why don't you just buy the right size hat? It's because not everybody is a standard size, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
and I use the tape. I use the foam. I've got one in back. A guy has told me over and over and over and over, I bought this hat from you and it's not right. I only wear this brand. And then I went and bought this brand from somebody else and it's not right. This brand's the only brand that fits me. Brings me in said brand hat that is the only hat that ever fits him, and that's what Grandpa wore, and that's the best one he ever had, and brings me in a copy of his head from one of his customs and puts it in there, says, this hat doesn't fit. Yes, would you like me to fit your egg-shaped head into this hat? And we go through that. So that's kind of like, to me, the felt versus straw thing. I refuse to tell somebody, I don't get on a lot of those forums for that reason. Yeah. Is sometimes as a hat guy, you want to jump back at this guy and, well, I've wore hats and my grandpa wore hats and my mom shaped hats at this place. But listen, bro, you aren't doing it now. And you are a perfect 7 1/8 regular oval and you're chewing this guy's butt that is between an 1/8 and a 1/4 and has a egg-shaped head, so it doesn't fit in any of these. Yeah. And they kind of go through it and they toughen up. So I like I said, a lot of those forums, I've been on them a few times at night kind of thing, and I said, I refuse. And when Danny was on here talking to you, the other one that always gets me the most is somebody comes in like, I want a 52 crown with a JB 6'5", 6.5 inch brim on the front, blah, blah, blah. And I was looking at him and I was like, okay, so the 52 crown is you're meaning a taller cattleman's with kind of the thumbprints and that on there, because just like Danny had said, a lot of us started shaping hats when there was a cattleman, a brick, and a Gus kind of thing. And a guy would come in and say, hey, I want a tall cattleman's and I want the side dents to kind of be there. And not everybody knows that. I always try and train them to that spot where they can come in. And with a lot of the internet sales, that's where you've seen a lot of that go. And these guys that are saying, that just buy one that fits. Well, guess what? He's in Podunk, Iowa, and there's not one. So he bought it online. And I walk a fine line on those deals because internet stores get cussed so bad
Yes.
about that hat was crooked. Well, guess what? When you put your ball cap on, it sits like this too. Your face isn't perfectly symmetrical, and they shaped it to a center line. Don't cuss the shaper or the hat shop that send it to you, because if I would encourage everybody to go to your local hat shop, and even if somebody calls me up and wants to buy one, I'll ask them what brand they're looking at. And because of the different variety of brands I have, I will tell them you can find a Boot Barn or a Cavender's 99% of the time. And if you want me to get you a hat, go to Cavender's and try on a Saratelli and tell me what size it is. Well, okay, I want an Atwood. Well, perfect. I've got a Saratelli here in a 7 1/8. Their 7 1/8 is fitting just like this quarter. I'm going to send you the quarter in the Atwood to go through there. So that's what I always tell people is hats and boots, don't, if you can prevent buying them online, support your local guy that can give you that customer service and that fit.
Well, speaking of Saratelli, though, not fitting, because Saratelli is a great American brand. They've been in business over 100 years.
Yeah.
Right. And they are still family owned.
Yep.
Right. But they're kind of removed from the Western industry because they're in New Jersey.
Yep.
Why do some hats fit like that? And what is it, the sizing? Because they sent us a few hats, and I got a 7 1/8, and it's huge.
Oh yeah.
Or, sorry, I got a 7 1/4, and I just figured, I'll tape it, but it's really big.
Oh yeah.
And so I would wear a 7 1/8 in a Saratelli probably, and I would wear a 7 1/8 in Jeff Bigger's hats.
Oh yeah.
But an American, Rodeo King, Resist All, I wear a 7 1/4.
Mm-hmm.
Why is that?
I'm a firm believer, in my opinion on this. This is based on just experience. Blocks, if they're using wooden blocks at a lot of those places, blocks will kind of shrink up.
Mm-hmm.
And those companies that are turning out a lot more hats, in 100%, this is opinion. So no emails. This is just T-Rav's opinion for the day. You get companies that are in a hurry. I would bet you that if you take every one of Biggers' hats, it's going to be same block, same everything. It's going to be there. That quality control of where he's going through. When you get to bigger companies, and there's not bigger companies, but when you get to larger companies and you've got a stack of 7 1/8, a stack of 7 1/4, and a stack here, and they're mass producing, there's always that chance. The second thing, from a hat maker standpoint, majority of the fit of a hat can vary on how the sweatband is sewn in.
Yes.
And how the sweatband is built. You can take a 7 1/8 hat and have cookie cutter sweatbands sitting there that are cut on the deal, sewn together, done everything the same. You're dealing with leather that has this, can go through this. The way you hold that hat going through the sewing machine can change the size of that hat. So I always tell people, there's no such thing as a mass-produced hat. At the end of the day, there's finishing that's done mass. There's sweatbands that are cut mass. They can use equipment to block. They can use the flanger, the plater. They can do all this mass. But at the end of the day, everyone I've seen, somebody is on a sewing machine.
Yeah.
The old Singer 107 sewing in there and going through it. And majority of hats in the United States are mass produced by people working in a factory. They're still touching it. Their pouncing machine might be different. The way they pounce it might be different. There's automated pouncing machines going through this. But god dang, there's still people building these hats. And you talk about New Jersey, Rodeo King's back there. So is Saratelli. And you go through Texas is where most of these hats are being done at. Majority of the ones I've got. And even Saratelli for a while had an office in Texas.
Yeah.
Because they were going to that. And they're doing really good right now going after the cowboy industry. Getting Rocker Steiner and picking up a bunch of those guys and going to, they aren't grabbing the classic cowboys. They're grabbing the new ones that are coming up, just where, Keith Maddox always said, brand your calves.
Yeah. And
Americans started going to the high school rodeos and junior rodeos and really going through that and going after the younger kids. Saratelli is really building up a name with the younger crowd going through there and building some pretty good hats.
I got a Ceratelli 6X years ago in a silver belly just to see if I would like the silver belly. I thought it was a great color, but am I going to wear it? Am I going to like it? And so that was my kind of a trial hat, right?
Yeah.
Because it was reasonably priced.
Yep.
It was a very good quality. It was made in America.
Huh?
And as a matter of fact, I, at the time, and I may have said this, I thought, and I probably said this when I was working in a hat store, I was like, you know what? The Ceratelli is a better hat than the Stetson Resistol 6X. But, it doesn't have the name, right?
Huh?
People want that Stetson.
Yep.
They want that Resistol.
Yep.
But I thought it was a better made hat.
Well, I when I first started doing hats, we talked about being up in Canada, and they were big on Americans, and I had talked to Mundy, and Mundy has been one of the driving forces why I'm in the hat business. He is a great friend, and I had called him as a single dad, and I had an opportunity to go back into the roping dummy business or go into the hat business. And Keith says, hats are always going to be around. He says, go work in a retail store, raise your boys, be there for that first half of their life, and then everything else will work out. And gave me that advice. And I'd called him when I was working in Canada, and they were doing a lot of Americans about merchandising and getting into it. And he said something that's always stuck in my mind is let them feel it. How you lay your hats out, top shelf, having your 1000X, stepping down, and let people feel it. And I'm a big proponent of that. When somebody comes in and they show interest, I geek out, number one, and I go grab the best hat that I've got in the place, and I say, feel this.
Yeah.
I'm not at all trying to sell this college kid a $1,600 hat, but you can't understand the 5, 6, 2X if you haven't felt a 100X. And so many stores, I think, and where I struggle, we've talked about kind of my passion for hats, is I see so many of these stores that are still selling X's and brands instead of selling the touch of them. And you can't expect a guy to move up from a 5, 6, 7, 10, 20, 50 to 100 without him first feeling that 100 and going, this is what it's supposed to feel like. If all of us never got to drive Dad's new pickup when we were in high school, we'd still be driving those old beaters because we didn't know what a good one was. And I'm a firm believer that a lot of that is being lost in the same way it was in the 70s with the marketing, is a lot of these hat stores are relying more on their shaping and their razzle-dazzle instead of understanding that there is a huge difference between a 5, 6, 7X in brands. And in some brands, there's not a big difference between a 5, 6, and 7. It's a sweatband buckle set that's changing the $20 to $50 instead of the feel. So I think that's really important, is if you want to buy good hats and you want to know about hats, go to a hat store that's got 100 that can explain to you the feel, even if they'll hit it with a little bit of steam and let you feel that flex and feel what it changes to. But your hands will never lie to you, no matter what. Yeah. Once you feel a good one and you feel the crease on it,
100%.
Your hands will never lie.
I love American Hat because they make some of the best hats that are readily available to everybody.
Yep.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't want to say mass produced, but they have a large volume and they have a large dealer network.
Yep.
Right. So I know it's hard to get American right now, but they make a great hat.
Yeah. And I think too, like I said, on the ones where I do with Brooks and them is coming through, is if I've got a 7 there and I've got a 20 there, and you can feel some of them if they come in and a brim is feeling a little bit soft. Yeah. And I've talked to some of these big factories, and I struggle so much because coming from a custom standpoint and building hats back there, when I pick one up out of the box and I'm going, they got in a hurry. Give me like 2 seconds. And what are you going to do? I said, just fill this right here. And I can go in back and I can put it in a plater and I can let it sit for the time. And I can put it on the marble and let it cool it down and then hand it to them. That hat is night and day difference.
See, that's
just from pulling it together.
That's an amazing ability you have that I think maybe some other custom hat makers don't, because they're so caught up in selling their own custom felt that they don't have all of these hats. If everybody had a plater who sold a Stetson or Resistol 6X, it'd be a different world.
Oh, yeah.
If Stetson and Resistol would just sell those 6X hats, leave the crown in there. Fine. You want to leave a crown in there? Fine. Send them flat though.
Yep. Or even the Ceratellis, when I get them in, I don't get a total flat hat because they won't necessarily do that because of their blocking system and where it goes. But they do have kind of a shovel that's wide and not sharp. Or even like the old hats, if you ever get a chance to get your hands on an old 100 or an old diamond horseshoe from the 80s or 70s, those hats came pre-shaped, but the brims had just a swoop to them, just real soft, where you could lay them down on the counter and kind of go through it. And I think that's one of my biggest pet peeves, but I get it where we're not mass producing, but where we're flying through stuff is from the manufacturing standpoint that I was taught around is you pull it over a block. And this is old school. This isn't. You pull it over that block and you let it sit on that block for a day. Well, all the moisture sucks out of it and it dries out on that block. You take it off the block and you'll flange it. So you get the wooden flange that fits it. You can leave the block in it sometimes or pull it out and you hand iron it. And then you finish it and get it all the finish you want. Make sure your brake line's crisp. And then you sew your sweatband in and you curl your sweatbands. And then you put it back on a flange board and iron the sweatband to where it lays flat, put the head in it, and let it sit under that bag for a day to pull the moisture out of it and dry it out and let it sit on there. To me, that's where and some of those custom hats you're talking about feeling, that's where that difference comes in, is letting them dry and cool and dry and those fibers pull together. But as we're up here in cells, we can't always be up here in production.
Right.
And that's where, like I said, the plater and I get stock hats from a lot of companies right now that'll come in. And I had one the other day, a guy in Montana had tried shaping somewhere and had taken a 10X silver belly and had put the corners on it. And it was so thin, it broke it.
Really?
And he had creased it. I mean, but he couldn't get that crease in it because the body was so thin. And steam and flex and steam and flex.
The only hat I've ever broken was a 6X Resistol.
Huh?
Cody Johnson.
Oh, I've had some antique hats in here and I've ripped my share where the stitching had been there. And I just argued with the hat maker today. I said, your hats aren't exactly the same as they were this long ago. I'm getting more of this shape of head instead of this shape of head. And I'll call them straight up. I'm not at all complaining. I'm a hat guy, so I can fix this. I have a set of band blocks. I have a plater. I have everything to fix whatever's going on with them. But you're next door with a Jiffy steamer in a mall that has a heat gun back there to try and fix it and a couple stretchers doesn't necessarily have, and not knocking them at all, but they don't have the equipment to fix this. So when their customer comes in and says, ouch, something feels different from this one from 3 years ago, or this one feels from this 3 years ago, instead of them being able to say, let me call my guy down there, or let me fix this for you. Here, try this other brand.
Yeah.
And they jump around and that understanding the knowledge of it and, the magic sauce I've got to put on a guy's hat that says, hey, I'm sorry you got this hat here and you bought a 6X this and the rainstorm ruined it. But this stuff I'm going to put on here is going to get you by for the summer. And here's some other stuff you can add to it when the rain's coming. And just understanding that working cowboy needs the 100X that I've got sitting over there. But he's working for $200 a day, a side of beef, and lives in the middle of nowhere. That's what he can afford. So I'm going to make it work as long as I can.
So what do you put on those hats for these guys who can't afford a hat? That
I've got some magic sauce that I was swearing to. That's a mixture up that came from an older guy in Texas that had bought out another older guy kind of thing. And it's a mixture of it. And a lot of those, though, I found even some of those hats, if I'll put it on the plater and I will flange it out with their head in it and let it sit and cool. If it is a decent 5X, 6X, those fibers will kind of come together, sucking that moisture out and putting that heat on there. and going through that process. And I sell some of the M&F silicone spray.
Yeah.
And I always tell them guys, you shouldn't have to put it on a good 100X. I get it. But I tell them, if you're going out somewhere and you know it's going to rain, snow, be miserable on you that day, there is nothing wrong with putting a little bit of that silicone spray on even a 100X, because it's going to give you that extra 10, 15 minutes in a downpour. Our downpours up here are different than a Houston downpour. Not at all saying that. But put some of that on that hat and let it, because it's silicone. It's going to flake off eventually. It's going to break down. But just take care of them. If you know it's going to be that nasty and raining out, maybe it's the day you put on a ball cap and a slicker, you know, and real cowboys are going to be pissed at that. But don't complain that your hat's soft.
Right.
And a black hat that dye's running, because I don't care who builds it. A black hat in a really good rainstorm is more than likely going to have a little dye.
Yeah. I mean, I agree 100%. Some more than others.
Yep. Some way more than others.
Looking at you, 20X resistol. Oh, sorry.
We got 3 minutes, but I think you guys want to answer some questions?
Sure.
What you said?
Yeah.
All right. How do you choose a hat color? Just by feel or by skin color or hair/beard?
I always tell girls when I start dating them that I know a lot about color palettes and eyes and color of hair, but that doesn't make me not like girls. And working in here, I've always said, I will look at a dude, the biggest, burliest dude that's been in here, and say, listen, man, this is going to be really uncomfortable for you, but I want you to try this. Look in the mirror and watch what this does with your complexion. If you take a buckskin hat and put it on a really pale complected, redheaded person, it washes them out. They're not going to have that confidence. Yeah. Now, if a guy comes in with real pale complexion and red hair and says, dude, I want a buckskin hat, I'm not going to talk him out of it.
Right.
But if I take him to a natural, or if it's a woman, I had some really, really pretty dark green hats in here, and I always tell them, I'm not going to tell you the color of this hat. I want you to put it on and look in the mirror and watch what it does to your eyes and hair. So I'm a firm believer that color only matters if you ask me.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what color to wear.
I love my silver belly, but it washes me out.
Yeah.
And I don't care.
Yep. Yeah, I wouldn't. If you ask, I'm going to tell you. But at the end of the day, I think when I first started shaping hats, I didn't think women belonged in hats. This was a decade ago, and you didn't see women wearing hats. A lot of the women I'd been around would get their boyfriend, their husband, their dad's hat out from under the seat of the pickup and put it on. It wasn't them. It was a tool. They had to wear it. Mm-hmm. As it progressed and I started putting hats on girls that were theirs and they were confident, mm-hmm. and it matched what they were wearing and their smile lit up and it was them, it changed. And I'm a firm believer in that. If you wear whatever color makes you feel comfortable and makes you look good, if you ask me, I will talk about hair and eyes and complexion.
There you go. Another question here we have is, what is your opinion on non-U.S. people rocking the cowboy hat? Should we wear open roads?
No, I wear what you want. I think wear yours and be comfortable. I think that's the coolest thing about the hat.
I missed that question. I'm sorry.
What's your opinion on U.S. people rocking the cowboy hat?
Not U.S. people, right?
Yeah,
non-U.S.
people. Yeah. Should we wear open roads?
Ooh. Anything but the open road.
I think wear what you want. There's a whole bunch of people in Switzerland that wear buckaroo hats.
Sweden too.
Sweden and
we just met one this weekend. Mike from Sweden was wearing a buckaroo and flat brim.
Yep. Short crown on it probably.
Yeah.
Yep. And I've got some friends in Europe that own hat stores, and AQHA is super popular over there. You know, the Rainers wearing the old school, and I tell people this all the time when they come in about Western hats, is especially here, there's cowboy hats and there's Western hats. If you feel that hat is too cowboy for you and you're not cowboy, put it on thinking, I live in the West. I can wear a Western hat and go through that. And I love hat nerds for that aspect. If you want to wear a 5-inch brim that's shoveled out and you're not America, own it, and that's your style. I don't think it has a region. I don't think it has a region. Well, wear a hat and study what it means.
We tell everybody, a lot of people who never wore anything but a baseball cap, get into a cowboy hat, and they want that 3.5, 4-inch brim because, it looks too big if you go bigger, right? They just, it's just too big for me. It's not, it's not. I wear 4.5, and every straw I have is 4.5. And I don't think anything about it.
Yep. And I don't wear 4.5s. Like mine are 4 1/4, and I have 3 7/8. And you met Kaysen, my youngest is 6'3".
Yeah, he's a big guy.
And I have tried putting him in 5-inch brims, and I've had him. I thought they looked phenomenal on him. And I always challenge people with this. I won't let them leave with something that looks bad. But if you're in the area, I will tell you, I think that 4.5 looks really good on you. Let's try it for a few days, and I can always trim it down because it's a lot easier to take it off than to put it back on.
Yes.
So there was a little girl in here yesterday. She's tiny, and she wanted a 5-inch brim hat. And she put it on and looked in the mirror, and I said, do you want my opinion? I said, let's take it down to 4.5 at least. I said, I feel like that is not very feminine on you, and you were going to struggle to wear that hat places. So we tried 4.5, and she goes, I see exactly what you mean. And it ended up at 4 1/4.
I mean, I wear a lot of 4 1/4 in felt because even in 4 1/4, I'll hit my brim. But 4.5, I beat it into the door every time I get a car. So, straw is just a little easier to tweak back into.
And I wear a 3. One of my favorite hats, I've got a silver belly, and I was watching a Buster Welch documentary one night from the 80s on YouTube. And I was like, dude, that is gangster. Nobody wears that kind of hat. And he had a little 3 7/8 inch brim, similar to an open road, but it had that, I call it the Texas swoop, really narrow on it, and had that old school AQHA really tight crease on it, and had the cutter bumps. And I had a hat, to not sound like a hippie, I think every hat has a shape. If you have a color of hat that you don't like, it could be that it hasn't got to the shape you want. And there's lots of guys that wear the exact same shape, but I think some little tweaks to the shape on a hat sometimes on a different color and kind of changing it up. But I always tell people, I got to change brim sizes throughout the month, because if I put my 3 7/8 inch on after I've been wearing my 4 1/4 and I think about it too much, it bugs me. So I'm a firm believer in just wear your hat and understand what goes with that. You see somebody that's not from the United States wearing a cowboy hat, don't be a dick. And there's a TikTok, and it bothers me every time. He's at the Houston rodeo, and it's a musician, and he goes around making these TikToks, making fun of dudes that have their hats on backwards.
Oh yeah.
And it chaps my ass. My boys from a young age have been told that if somebody's hat's on backwards, part of being a cowboy and wearing this hat is walking up very politely, putting your arm around the dude and saying, hey, your hat's on backwards. If he's with a woman, don't embarrass him. That dude, when I worked for a stock contractor, those guys buy the tickets that pay the stock, that pay your added money.
Yes.
Do not. And the hat business drives me nuts like that. Oh, his hat's on backwards, or it goes to it. Don't be a dick.
Look, I tell this. I've said this many times. If these guys think that just cowboys alone can keep the Western industry in business, they are out of their mind. That would be shut down. They would never be able to find a hat.
I struggle through with my passion for hats, passion for the West, and my morals and ethics. I talked with some musicians the other day about it, is they struggled with people showing up that weren't their genre. And I won't mention names of the gal that's winning everything right now, and everybody's saying she's not country or going through that. However, I think the respect for that way of life. I grew up in town. My parents owned a gun shop. My dad had started Colts when I was a kid, but I loved hats. And it's progressed to this. And any chance I get, I think FFA is such a great organization, even though they don't let their kids wear hats in their official uniform. I get it. But I still do a lot with FFA because that takes a city kid and brings him into our way of life. And in my opinion, and my feeling is, if you respect our way of life, and I walk up and I say, hey man, your hat's on backwards. And you say, oh, thank you so much. And you turn it around. you're a cool dude.
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a 2X Cody James that looks like it had been under the seat of your pickup. I don't care. You were respectful about it.
I've seen that hat before.
It's
come across it.
I've seen them numerous. But I think walking up saying, hey, your hat's on backwards.
Yeah.
No, it's not, asshole. Well, guess what, bro? I was trying to be polite to you. I'm not trying to be cooler. You very seldom get that. But I think that's where the big disconnect is in our industry is don't knock that dude because of the style of his hat, the burning it all over, the putting all of the, as gaudy as it looks. Treat him with respect. That person and I think on the same side, people that are asking, not beating a dead horse, but the guy that had asked, if I'm not from the U.S., can I wear a cowboy hat? That guy has the decency to ask that. And he respects our way of life, or she, I didn't know what, that person on there respects our way of life and respects the hat. And to me, I think that's the deepest thing. And we're doing some switching around here is, man, hats are so much more than hats. It's almost a religion. We talk about the hope, heritage, history, hard work when I talk about the H. If we worried more about the OGs of our industry and less about all the OOTDs, we'd be a totally different industry.
But you got to look at this too. I got to think how long ago, 70 years ago, everyone wore a hat.
Oh, yeah.
If they left the house, they had a hat.
Yep. Oh, yeah.
And no matter what it was, they were wearing a hat.
If you ever want a good read, I forget what it is, but there's a book about why Kennedy killed the hat. And John F. Kennedy was the first president sworn in not wearing an open road.
Yeah.
And his wife was not wearing a hat. I don't think that's where it killed it. I don't think anybody cared at that point. However, you look back to when everybody wore a hat, and that generation, they all went and bought the same hat at the same hat store. First rainstorm, or had them shape it. They were usually softer, kind of
dress
fashion
weights.
body. Yeah, dress weights, and went through that. But it meant so much more to them. Well, if you go from the 55 Chevy to the 57 Chevy and see how the cabs came down, and you go from all the pictures of those guys going in and out of the factories working every day, they had a locker and they put their hat in it. Well, as the Industrial Revolution changed and those guys started going into an office, in a cubicle, they didn't have a locker to put their hat. They didn't change out. There started being a headrest on the back of the seat of the car. So the roof came down, the headrest came on, there became a seat belt.
Mm-hmm.
They weren't as free in the car. The cars got a little narrower. There wasn't a passenger seat, and kind of went through that. So there are some really interesting reads out there, but I think society just kind of grew away from it. And I wish society now that we're all wearing hats would go back to that and realize I will never tell somebody to take their hat off at a table. I have rules that I think separate me because I'm a hat maker and a hat shop owner. If there is somewhere safe to set my hat on the floor while I'm eating dinner, I'm setting it down there.
Yeah.
If I'm at a fast food restaurant, I'm probably not setting it down for some little kid to spill his drink in there. But when I introduce myself to a woman, I take my hat off and shake her hand. My boys have been kicked in the butt since an early age that they still flinch if they don't take it off. I'm not a big tip your hat. Like, that's respectful there. And when I go into church, I wear my hat into church. When I get into the sanctuary, I feel that my grandmother from heaven is going to smack me in the back of the head. And I know that if she didn't, my mom that's sitting beside me is going to. So I think the reverence of a hat has somewhat been lost. And I think as cowboys, it is our job to spread that. When there's a kid wearing his hat somewhere, guess what, bro? Let his parents handle it. Or let him figure that out. But lead by example. Take your hat off, set it where it's supposed to be.
Right.
It doesn't matter if John Doe tips his hat to meet your wife. You do it and set the example. And I think if more of us would worry about that and what goes with the hat instead of what patches on the back or what names on the inside, you would see society change as a whole, because we're showing them that hat is more than a fashion device.
I like it. And this is kind of the reason we were talking on the phone, and you were kind of going through a lot of this philosophy that you have.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I thought, yeah, this is going to be a great podcast.
No, I appreciate that. And when you told me, I was like, I hope he comes down here, because as much of a hat guy as I am, I'm really not that dyed in the wool. If you bring me in a hat and ask me my opinion, I will tell you this is how I feel about that hat because of this. Yeah. And I will show you, and we can have that discussion. But I really do think that heritage of the hat and that heritage of the West could change the world if we worried as an industry. Hat guys in general, worry more about your customers and the respect and the heritage of that hat than we do about the sweatband and the stickers on the back. So
I have one last question.
Okay.
Yeah. This is from Thomas. He says, I've inherited several Stetson hats that are one size too big. What do they recommend to size them down a tad?
Depending on quality of the hat and what you're going to be wearing it for, some masking tape, half on the sweat, half on the hat, or you can buy some foam and cut it in half and stick it kind of right at the base of where the sweatband rolls up on there. If they're really good hats and you're wanting to wear them, find a reputable store and they can block them and flange them and get them to where they fit you. So it just kind of depends on what you're wanting to do. Again, that's where finding a good hat shop, not necessarily, and there are good shapers at Western stores, they're there, but find somebody that knows their shit and let them help you.
And that has the equipment to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So is that something you would be able to do?
Yeah, I can do that. Don't let anybody, this is one of mine, some sweatbands you can shrink with steam. I put a lot of sweatbands in hats that stores think they can steam the wrong sweatbands and will ruin it. So you can't really shrink a sweatband. But yeah, I can for sure do it if you're in the area or you want to send them in.
Yeah. So there you go. And a lot of those custom shops can do that, right?
Yeah.
So Bigger, I know Bigger can do it. Was it Capital Hatters?
Yep, Capital does
can
them.
do it. So, find a good hat maker in your area, or like you said, you can send them in here.
Yep. We can for sure do, or call me. I've got lots of friends that I can send you to in the area. I have no problem letting you know reputable guys that I know to send them to.
All right. Then we're going to miss the train.
Sweet.
So, real quick, I know it's every video somebody asks, what hat was he wearing? What shape is that? Tell us about the hat you're wearing.
I'm terrible about shapes. I would call it wide cattleman's. I've got the cutter bumps.
Mm-hmm. Mule kicks as well.
Mule kicks. My grandpa told me that that's what cowboys wear.
Yeah.
Wear the mule kicks, because the old open roads, another hat nerd deal to end it on. The mule kick, I was always told, came from the cattle buyers in the stockyards. They wore the soft open roads.
Okay.
And while they'd be writing orders and buying, they'd reach up and push them down. And that was a weak spot. So that originally started from weak felt.
That makes sense.
I do it because my grandpa cried. This was his old open road that we had shaped for him. And I did this during COVID, and he started crying. His dad died when he was 13. And he says, I've always wanted that in the front of a hat, but I never knew what to ask for. So a mule kick, a Fort Worth crown, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So I've got the mule kicks because I knew what it meant to Grandpa Sam at 80-something years old when I put it on there.
That is a stiff open road.
That's an old 20X.
Yeah.
That he had that was just like that. He had a bunch of the silver bellies. And we rebuilt it and cut it down and put his name in it and bound it. So that's one of the good old 20s from there. He wore a lot of 20s. But yeah, I would call it either a wide cattleman's or a narrow brick with the cutter bumps, and I bumped the top out, kind of tightened up the crease, and then just kind of a wide and low brim. It's a 4 1/4, and it's one of my hundreds that I built. Feel that sucker.
100X?
Yeah.
That's a heavy body.
Yeah.
That thing is heavy.
Yeah. I wore that through some snowstorms and still.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a good finish on it too.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a pretty good finish.
Yeah. That's one of the Winchesters I'd got.
I was going to ask you. I didn't know if you wanted to say.
Yeah, it's a Winchester.
How old is it?
Probably 4 or 5 years old. That crown that's as
hard as a rock.
Yep. I always tell myself that's what I like, and the biggest reason I like them stiff hats like that and the crown there is when the wind gets blowing up here on the plains, that sucker ain't coming off.
Yeah. So this hat, I was I wish I wore a different hat after we were up in Gillette, because this one, it was always too oval for me. It was too round.
Yeah.
And I'd taken it to Cody Bates 2 or 3 times and had him hot block it and oval it out.
Wow.
And finally, we lowered the crown just a little bit to make it oval,
Yep.
and now it fits great, but it's too tall for me. Or,
Wow.
you know, it sits too high for
Yep.
me.
Oh, yeah.
I like them a lot lower.
Coming down.
And I was fighting that wind. I was trying to carry stuff, and I'd point my head into the wind.
Oh, yeah.
I almost lost it a few times.
That's what
I didn't.
I always tell people, what takes a hat off your head
Yeah.
is the fit. And if you think about years ago, they used to have the Lincoln commercials on the Super Bowl, and they would pump some steam in there or some smoke while the wind tunnel was going around it.
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
can
yeah.
see how aerodynamic it was. Most of the time when people say their hat is sucked off their head, the reason is, and I'll always ask people when they come in, if there's any gaps around here, the wind hits it, takes the path of least resistance and takes it off your head. And everybody's head's built on a taper. So if you build one that fits right at the spot, and then when you suck it down and it hits your ears, that sucker isn't coming off. So the fit's what holds it on. But yeah, if you're ever in the area, we'll take your head pattern with the Conformateur Vermilion, keep it on file. So you call 10 years down the road and say, hey, I want to buy whatever hat you got there. I've got enough. I can order you a custom fit JW Brooks. I can fit you a 6X, whatever it is, and your head pattern is in the card file.
And you'll still do customs for now?
Yep. If bodies are available and I've got some around, I'll build customs.
All right. Hey, buddy, it was great talking to you.
Yes, sir.
I really appreciate you having us in today.
No, I appreciate it.
Nice
I've been watching you guys for a long time. I appreciate you guys taking the time to
I didn't know
come
that.
interview a Colorado boy about it.
I didn't know that, so
Yes,
that's
sir.
the first I heard of it.
Yes, sir.
So we really appreciate it. Thank you for watching us.
No worries.
So
I have a last question. Though.
All right, one more question.
Yes. So earlier today, there was a gentleman here buying a straw hat.
Uh-huh.
And I heard you say you explained to him the meaning behind the H.
Yes.
Would you say that for the
Can,
camera?
So-
can they see this on camera, on one of these cameras? This one?
Oh, yes.
The
They
HS
can
camera?
say, yes.
So when we started, this signified my last name. I didn't want a brand that stuck me with hats, because if the hat business didn't work, I wanted to be able to sell popsicles and still have my brand that was cool. So I got this brand here about 3 months after we opened the shop here. My grandfather passed away, and I got to thinking one night, I was laying in bed and praying and missing my grandpa, and I realized that not only did this stand for my last name, but everything my grandpa stood for. So that H, the big H here, stands for heritage, because I don't care if you're riding pins at a feedlot or in a high-rise apartment somewhere or a banker. Somebody went before you to lay the groundwork to make you who you are today. So it stands for heritage. Not only does it stand for heritage, but it also stands for hope. We opened up and got our first shipment of hats in on Friday the 13th when COVID hit. And we had 90 days to sell $100,000 worth of hats and $28 in our pocket. And God pulled it all together, and it worked out. American worked with us. Everything worked out really well. So it stands for hope. Also, it stands for history, because good, bad, or indifferent, your past has prepared you for today and made you who you are today. So it stands for history. The smiling part, it stands for hard work, because no matter what your heritage is, where you're at in your hope journey, or what you've been through, or what your history is, you still got to get up every morning and bust your ass to find success. And at the end of it, the circle stands for life, because I'm a firm believer, if you never forget your heritage and those people that have gone before you and you're always grateful for it, you never forget to grow in your hope journey, because there's going to be times in your life where the only thing that pulls you through the storms is hope. And you always embrace your history and learn your lessons, and you get up every morning and bust your ass. It's a pretty easy recipe to find success. So that's what the Flying H stands for. I always tell people when I put it on the back of their hat, I don't want you to remember the fat kid in Colorado that shaped your hat or where you bought it at. I want you to remember why you get to put it on and what to be grateful for every day. So we've got some cool branding stuff coming up with that, some t-shirts, some caps, and I just think, every family's got that. And that was something I learned from my grandpa, my grandparents, my dad, my great-grandpa, was those pillars. And I think that's something the world needs more of.
That's pretty deep, and I love it. Nothing more to say. Guys,
Awesome.
If you're in the northern Colorado area, stop in Hamblen Hats. If you guys go to Cheyenne Frontier Days this year, it's only about 45 minutes.
Yep, we're right here. We're right. If you draw a line from Greeley to Cheyenne and Fort Collins over. We're right where everything intersects. We're about 30 minutes from Cheyenne, Greeley, and Fort Collins.
All right. Hey, thanks again, guys. We'll
Awesome.
see you in
Thank
the
you,
next
guys.
one.
All right, and cut.